All right, so this is going to be a little bit more of an. I think this recording is going to be more ordered than yesterday. Safe to say. So, what's this recording going to be about? This recording is going to be about something that I've been ruminating on throughout today, and some core elements of this idea I've been ruminating on for a while. Let's get right into it. So, when it comes down to humanistic writers, and when I say humanistic writers, of course, we're talking about psychology. They describe a schizoid state, right? And they go into detail about the schizoid state in more profound ways than the quote-unquote personality disorder experts do. You know, the personality disorder experts, you know, they use trust and mistrust, but they don't really go into the phenomenology or into the mechanics of that trust and mistrust. They just describe the manifest phenomena. They don't really describe the unmanifest phenomena. And even with a description of, you know, the unmanifest phenomena, they don't really describe the more so scenarios within that phenomena. You know, what's really going on with that phenomena? What does it lead to? How does it make you feel? You know, they don't really go too much in depth. But humanist psychologists really do. And the reasoning behind why humanist psychologists do is because when it comes down to something like SZPD is a personality disorder that can manifest and occur in people in this day and age more than in any other day and age. Like with Greenberg, you know, she in her book, you know, she describes that there's been a whole bunch of different ages. Like in the previous epoch, I'm saying epoch, well, it's been a couple of years. You know, there was a couple of years where there were just a whole bunch of borderlines. You know, this might have been more so like around the time of like the 60s and the 70s, where people are just having sex with each other and they're not really developing no real, true, close intimacy, no real, true, close relationships. They just believe that the freedom of the libido quantifies progress when, without a responsibility of having the power of the libido just, you know, controls you. So you had that borderline stage. Then you had the stage of the entrepreneur. So that would be like, you know, probably like, I guess, 40s, 50s, 30s, all that sorts of crap. That was like the age of the narcissist. And now it's the age of the schizoid, where you're dealing with an age where there's a whole lot of alienation going on, and this alienation can easily lead to the formation of a schizoid personality. You know, Rollo May, you know, I'm reading Love and Will, and he discusses that in the introductions. Now, why am I talking about this? Because this isn't really going to be a recording on schizoids, but I'm still talking about the schizoid state. Well, the reason why I'm talking about the schizoid state is because while safety, mistrust, existential despair, all of these things are problems, they're really problems because schizoids were not able to have the existence of one core element, and that core element is anchors. Schizoids have never had anchors in their lives. And when you look at society, of course, you know, we live in a schizoid society, more or less. Really, we live in a society that, since it's gone through all of these different ages of, you know, the normalization of personality disorder traits, we live in a society where personality disorder traits are the norm. The narcissistic social media personality is, you know, rewarded. The borderline lover is seen as the most ideal type of lover. And now the schizoid man is seen as the normal type of man. So there's a normalization of mental disorder traits because, it feels comfortable. Even though it's not normal, it's comfortable. So why do I believe anchors to be the primary cause of the schizoid age that we live in now? Well, that's because we don't really have any. This recording was going to primarily be on maybe tribalism or something like that, and I'm still going to touch upon that. But when it comes down to it, let's take, for instance, culture, right? And let's use myself for an example as a black male. With the postmodern age destroys anchors. It destroys grand narratives. It destroys schemas that modernity has had for quite a long time. And with the destruction of those schemas, we don't really have a whole lot to grab upon, right? And postmodernity didn't really, acquire this. It didn't really acquire that behavior by itself. It got that behavior from its parent, which was modernity, because modernity did the same thing with pre-modernity. Modernity did the same thing with pre-modernity in the sense of, if there's elements, we don't really like abstraction. We don't like abstraction. So when it comes down to it, the unmanifest, the unconscious, all those different things, we don't really care about it. All we care about is the manifest. Really, as modernists, that's all we care about. We care about science, materialism. That's all we really care about as modernists. And postmodernity, of course, says, even we're going to use that same model to debunk materialism and all that other sorts of stuff and scientific logic. But with postmodernity and modernity, it's destroyed so many anchors that we really need. Like me as a black person, us as black people, all we really have is the fact that we're black. And that's not really a ideal way to unify. Because first off, honestly, I'm starting to think that there's not really such a thing as racial unity among any race. Ethnic unity, maybe. Racial unity, no. Whenever there's unity, it's from a specific people groups. The Indians, we're going to rebel. It's not the Southeast Asians rebelling. It's Indians rebelling. It's not freaking East Asians rebelling against the Japanese. It's Koreans rebelling against the Japanese. Ethnicity is what really matters. And black people, of course, don't really have a conception of ethnicity because we just have black. And we have things like African American, which again, where in Africa? Melanated. Okay. Melanation is a phenotype, so now you gotta pinpoint where that phenotype comes from. And of course, when it comes down to melanin and melanation, melanin can exist anywhere as long as it's not deficient in vitamin D. You can be a melanated person anywhere. So where do you really come from? And of course, black people don't really have that. And I've already talked about this. All races is getting to a point where a whole lot of different races are, they're going to exist without a conception of ethnic identity. It's just going to be erased from them. Because, shit. I'm sorry, y'all. I got something like mucus stuck in my, I got something stuck in my nose. I think it's just something I gotta spit out, but I'm not really gonna be able to spit it out. I'm just have to try and swallow it. But anyways, we don't really have that. No matter what race you look at, it's all that stuff is being withered away. So you don't have an anchor of identity. So let's look at land. You don't really have an anchor on the land you live in, because a lot of what, land is now, land really, all it is, all the significance of it is just property value. And we talked about that with ideas on land. We don't really have an anchor on land. We don't even really have an anchor on family. Because, of course, family, the conception of family was already destroyed with modernity, which made it to where, the family has to be a stable unit of society. But, of course, a stable unit of society just means that the family has to be a contributing part of production, honestly. And then postmodernity comes along and says, well, that's all the family is. And it reveals that. But that revelation and that destruction of the family system doesn't lead to a reconfiguration of the family or to a new way of finding familial feelings without the existence of the nuclear family. All it leads to is just further alienation, further wandering out into the woods, lost. So you don't really have an anchor there. It just leads to further alienation. A lot of what modernity and postmodernity has done is just made us further alienated. It destroyed a whole lot of things with how most of us humans have always lived, since the beginning of time, but it didn't really give us no adequate solutions. Modernity gave us solutions, but those solutions were merely to preserve modernity. They weren't solutions for problems. They were solutions to maintain the facade of modernity. So all these different things. And of course, when it comes down to the schizoid state, of course, that's what the schizoid state is. Existential despair. You don't have an anchor on what reality truly is. Trust and mistrust. You don't have an anchor on what type of people you need around you and what type of people you don't need around you. What type of experience are for your best interest, what type of experiences aren't. You don't know that. You don't have that anchor or whatever. That's the schizoid state. So, all of these things, all of this stuff, is important to consider. And for me, when it comes down to anchors, the only way to establish an anchor is with a physical representation of that thing, right? Let's take, for instance, with me, let's just take, for instance, servitors, like within chaos magic. When you find like a, let's just say you get a servitor book, whether it be from the Gallery of Magic or whether it be like a book like Create a Servitor Companion by John Crider. Either way, when it comes to servitor creation, you need a physical representation of that servitor in order for you to have a better idea of the fact that it exists. And it's no different from, Pneuma, I guess you could say. We'll just call it Pneuma. Because we're talking about ideas, we're talking about pursuits, we're talking about sociological elements, and all of these things are kind of wrapped up into one. So we'll just call this thing Pneuma. When it comes down to Pneuma, you need a physical representation of it down here. So if you're alienated from, let's just say, family, you need something to suggest otherwise. And of course, in the past, that thing was the tribe. Your tribe, I'm not talking about tribalism as just in groups of people coming together forming a specific culture. I'm talking about tribalism as in tribalism, as it really was. Tribalism as in there's these people and they share a haplogroup and they live in one particular area. That's a tribe. Not, something as simplified as, hey, we all just share a particular culture. No. Right? Which, you might argue that point, but again, you have to come down to the fact that the easiest way to maintain a culture is through haplogroup in some regards. You could do it in other ways, but the most safest way is haplogroup, right? Now, that's what I would deem as the easiest way to cure family, is through tribalism. It's through the idea of, hey, sure, my mother and my father are dickheads, but like I have all of these other different peoples around me that share the same genes as I do, and that represent different genetic expressions of genes within me that, you know, sort of show themselves as, you know, hey, you know, I could be like them and express my genes that way instead of expressing my genes the dysfunctional way that my family does, right? And with that, we're sort of going down the Frommian route, going down maybe the R.D. Laing route of, you know, the family structures, conformist, and all that sorts of stuff. But we're not placing the responsibility of conformist family structure. You know, we're not taking that and saying, hey, you know, just find some other group to conform to. No, you know, you still have responsibilities to yourself, and the deterministic elements of your family, of your genetics, you can still mend those things without conformity through the tribe, right? And when we look at things like culture can start off as we have a whole bunch of people coming together sharing one idea, but when it leads to a people, then it gains power, then it gains leverage. But if it's just this nominous thing, it doesn't necessarily matter. Going back to black culture, if we don't see an articulation of black culture actually working within the real world, it doesn't matter if black culture is within our heads, if this idea of this thing is within our heads. If it's not actualized in the real world, who cares? And of course, it can't really be actualized in the real world like that, because there's many different, like I said, many different people groups, many different black peoples from many different areas and with different ideas. So you can't have just this black culture. You know, you can't just have something as simple as that. So, you know, you have that with culture. That could be an anchor. Blood can be an anchor. When you look at land, blood can be an anchor to a land. You know, the fact that your race adapted and was born out of this land and you have a connection to it. And when you're in an alien land, you can anchor yourself within an alien land through the use of destiny, through the use of, hey, you know, we have a particular mission to carry out. But then you have a responsibility to actually carry out that mission. You have a responsibility to actually perform actions and rituals within the land that act as significators of that destiny, you know. And within America, you know, America did that, but then it did a whole bunch of other stuff that canceled it out. You know, I talked about that, you know. We're the land of the free, but you got slavery, right? God's people, religious freedom. You know, you're doing a whole bunch of rituals and you're saying a whole bunch of things about your land, but you're doing things that are otherwise, right? So you're canceling out the things that could have anchored you within that land, and you're leaving yourself open to people that will anchor themselves within your land. In that regards, corporations. You know, America really is a corporate state when you really look at it. So anchors are very important. You know, we talked about how it is with land, with culture, with people. You need physical things. And the pneumatic stuff, the spiritual stuff, comes later. You know? Like, you know, you'll hear a lot of times on the left-hand path, if you're doing this work and, you know, you don't see any changes in real life, you're just wasting your time. It's the same thing with what I'm talking about here. If you're talking about a whole bunch of sociological changes you want to do, but you don't have no anchors to carry them out in, you're just wasting your time. You know? And that's really what you see a lot of times. And that's why the world that we live in is schizoid. Because what does the schizoid do? The schizoid creates a real self within his own head because he's unable to actualize that real self within the real world. Same thing as what our world does now. We can't actualize stuff within the real world, so we shut ourselves off or we place ourselves within things that are other than the real world, like the internet, media, you know, even things like anime and stuff, and some books, you know. It's just you place yourself within things that take you away from the real world, just as the schizoid does. All right. So we really do live in a schizoid state, and that schizoid state is because of the fact that there aren't any anchors anywhere within society, and there aren't really anchors anywhere within society that can help heal society. So you have to. So the challenge of the current generations is to create those anchors. In order for that to happen. And that's really going to take a cultural shift. And I think that cultural shift is going to be carried out by a minority. I don't think that this is a majority-based... I don't think that this is a majority-based thing. Right? So, how can I say it? How would I do it, right? I would probably do it if I had to say it, right? If I had to do it. You have to do it through it has to be individualistic. What do I mean by individualistic? Characterological, you know. Using a word that Eric Fromm uses. Because you don't really have no other choice. You know, there's not really a whole bunch of, you know, we live in an age now to where people don't really own a whole bunch. All you have is yourself. All you have is your identity. So whatever you want within the world, you're going to have to be the anchor, you know. And once you become the anchor, then you can attract similar peoples with a similar anchor. And throughout, you know, interacting and building together, y'all create one anchor, right? When it comes down to blood, you know, you might have a whole bunch of men and women together. They might be of different people groups, but through mating continuously, you create one people groups. That's your anchor of blood. Mating together in a central location. There's land. Culture is the idea part that came in beforehand. So those three things: blood, land, and culture. The landmarks of what makes a race a race. And you can do that through what I just described, you know. But again, it's going to have to be a breakaway. People are going to have to break away from, you know, who they're around. Because really, when it comes down to people groups now, a whole lot of what people groups are is empty. You know, you might find the essence of people groups, or you might find some people groups that are still alive in a sense, in, you know, some tribalistic areas. But that's about it. In the city, there's really no such thing as like, there's not really such thing as ethnicity anymore, in the sense of people maintaining an ethnic identity. And if they do, it's a debasement. You know, a lot of people are just maintaining the easier qualities of their ethnicity that they can maintain, and a lot of times the easier qualities are usually the worst. So we're really a lot of people are just gonna have to break away, and we're gonna have to form a new race, really. And I already talked about this, but you know, that's really what it's gonna have to be. And the way that this relates to the schizoid is I had to break. The reason why it relates to the schizoid state and why it can relate to the healing of the schizoid personality is that's what I had to do. I literally had to break away from the real self, false self. And I had to adapt to a mindset that placed the Geist over the uncomfortability of having a self. The individual Geist in connection with the absolute Geist. Stealing a word from Hegel and Rollo May. Even though Hegel, is famous for it, Rollo May used it in a psychological sense. So I'm stealing it from both of them. So doing that is what helped me. And of course, this can go back to existentialism. A lot of people are saying that when it comes down to healing the world, it's going to be a lot of what this movement is going to be is an existential movement, because we really don't have no choice for it to be anything else but an existential movement, because we really don't have any meaning left. So we have to create it, of course. We don't really have any meaning left from postmodern destruction. So, we don't really have no other choice except to be existentialists within our world, unless you're going to be a religious person again. And again, you're still going to have to be existentialist in the sense that you're going to have to create a passion and a determination within yourself that the world lacks. You're going to have to create a trust with who you are and what you believe in that the world's not going to support. So even then, you're going to have to be existentialist. There's no other way around this. And I find that to be quite interesting. But anyways, I'm heading to freaking school. I think I clarified and I talked about all I needed to clarify with this topic. So it's been your boy Jalen signing out. Peace.